2025. I can see that we have present Councillors Brogan, Councillors Archie Buchanan and Matthew Buchanan. I have apologies from Councillor Kalikis, and I can see that Councillor Toner has joined as a substitute. Also present today is Councillor Convery. Councillor Cooper, not seeing you present. Also present today are Councillors Cowan, Cowie, Devlin and Dewar. Apologies from Councillor Fagan. Also present today are Councillors Falconer and Ferguson. I have apologies from Councillor Fulton, and I'm just checking to see if we have a substitute. I'm not seeing anyone at present. Councillor Gowland, I'm not seeing you present. Apologies, thank you. Also present today are Councillors Gray and Lennon. Councillor Lockhart, I'm not seeing you present. Also present today are Councillors Mars, McAllen, McCreary, McLachlan, Ray, Robb, Shearer and Williams. We have a number of officers in attendance, and with that I'll pass back to yourself, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations? Julia Mars, I believe you did give prior notice, Julia.
Yes, I would declare an interest on item 15, please, the Castlebank Outbuildings CAT proposal.
Thank you very much. Don't see anyone else. Item 2 on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'll move that as a correct record.
I'll second that.
Is there any issues arising? Matters arising? Don't see anyone. Thank you very much. Item 3 is the minutes of the Asset Transfer Appeals Panel, and that's pages 17 to 20. And I'll move that as a correct record as well.
And I'll second that.
Any questions or comments? No. Item 4 on the agenda is monitoring items, and it's Housing and Technical Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 24-25, and that's excluding the Housing Revenue account, and that's pages 21 to 26. And it's, beg your pardon, Kathleen Gowrie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to provide information on the actual expenditure against budget for Housing and Technical Resources, excluding the HRA, for the period the 1st of April 24 to 31st of March 25. At section 5.1 and 5.2, it notes a break-even position after approved transfers to reserves of 1.718 million. This includes a further transfer to reserves of 1.013 million from the transfer to reserve position reported to previous committee. Appendices A to D on pages 23 to 26 provide details in the year-end position. Detailed variance explanations, proposed virements and approved transfers to reserves for each of the services are shown on appendices C and D. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. The committee is asked to note the final outturn position to 31st of March of a break-even after approved transfers to reserves, and to approve the proposed budget virements.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second that.
Have we got any questions? Don't believe so. Thank you very much. Item 5 on the agenda is Housing and Technical Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring, Housing 24-25, Housing Revenue Account HRA, pages 27 to 30. And again, it's Kathleen Gowrie.
Thanks, Chair. Again, this report covers the period the 1st of April to 31st of March 25. At section 5.1, it notes a break-even position. This is after transfers from the HRA reserve of 2.974. The previous position reported to committee was an expected transfer from reserves of 2.544, and the reason for the movement of 430,000 is outlined at section 5.2. On Appendix A on page 29, this provides detailed variance explanations and proposed virements for the HRA. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. The committee is asked to note the final outturn position at the 31st of March as a break-even after proposed transfers from reserves, and to approve the proposed environments.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second them.
We get any questions? Kirsten, Rob? Now, before you start, Kirsten, just remind me, Elizabeth Ann, is the people online are not got volume, did you say?
The live stream doesn't have any sound, so
I
we are
see.
aware of a technical issue. We will re-upload the recording
Right.
after the meeting.
Okay, so it's not live stream, but it can be viewed later on by members of the public. But
Well, it's being live streamed, but the sound.
the sound is, but members at home can hear it. Members online.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's
Carry on,
okay.
Kirsten.
Thank you. In a few of the last report and this one and the next two as well, we're looking at an overspend in planned maintenance. It's not a bad thing because obviously things are needing maintained and repaired. But I was just looking at how we're going to plan for this in future. Are you able to give us an idea of the maintenance backlog? Certainly maintenance is a big issue in my ward. And also how we're going to plan for that in future. For example, how we're managing budgets in future to maintain more so that we can, especially with climate-induced storms and severe weather and the ageing housing stock, how we're going to plan for that. Thanks.
Okay, so I can't comment on the backlog, but I'll pass that over to somebody operational after I've answered your other question, which is about how do we plan for that in the future. So we have a business plan for the HRA, which looks forward for the next 30 years. And we are working on that just now. That will inform rent setting and the budget process for 26-27. And as part of that, we're looking at where there are variances from budget and what we need to build in. So if there's areas where there's not adequate budget just now, how we build that in and the impact that that would have going forward, and kind of working out, you know, in the future what potential rent increases may be, or indeed where perhaps you have to take action to reduce expenditure. So that's how that's kind of all dealt with.
Craig, would you like to come in and comment on that?
Thanks, Chair. The backlog maintenance budget, we are trying our best to manage it within budget where possible. It is a challenge, I have to say. Following the storm, the backlog maintenance repairs number hit just above 10,000. We managed to get that back down to about 7,000 at the moment, and we're working our way through that to reduce it further. It is an ongoing issue, and we are trying our best. We're looking at reallocating some of the resources within building services to tackle that backlog, but it will take us a bit of time to get through it. We're also looking at another way of delivering it in terms of an increased resource, but again, that will have a burden on HRA, so we're just looking at that at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
Thanks very much. I appreciate everything you're doing, working hard to bring that backlog down as well. Do we have a value on that backlog? Are you able to put a value on it to give you an idea to feed into the budget processes for future years?
I don't have a specific value at this stage, but you know, we are discussing, you know, with Sham and the finance team about what's possible and what's not, to be brutally honest. So we'll keep an eye on it, and there's varying costs obviously per repair, but we can get an estimate if that's helpful.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Kirsten. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, read that report then. Item 6 on the agenda is the Housing and Technical Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 25 to 26, excluding housing revenue account, and that's pages 31 to 36. Again, Kathleen Gowrie. Kathleen.
Thanks, Chair. So the next set of reports are moving us on to the new financial year, and this covers the period the 1st of April to the 16th of May 25. It also provides a forecast for the year. So this is the first report that's coming to committee for 25-26, and it's section 5.1. It notes that there's a projected outturn which is a break-even at this stage in the financial year. Appendix A on page 33 details the key highlights by service and by resource. Appendices A to D provide details on the current projected outturn position, detailed variance explanations and proposed environments for each of the services, and those are shown on appendices C and D. If I refer members back to section 2 of the report on page 31, the committee is asked to note the forecast of a break-even to 31st of March 26, and to approve the proposed budget variance.
Thank you very much. I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
Is there any questions or comments? Don't see any. Next item on the agenda is item 7, and it's Housing and Technical Resources Revenue Budget 25-26, and that's the Housing Revenue Account, pages 37 to 40.
And this is the first report for financial year 2025-26, covering the period from April to the 16th of May. At section 5.1, then it notes that there's a forecast outturn, which is a break-even position, and that is including a planned transfer from the HRA reserve. Appendix A provides further detailed explanations, and there are no variances on the budget or variance that are being reported on the HRA at this point in time. So if I refer members back to section 2, then the committee is asked to note the break-even position of a forecast at the 31st of March 26.
Thank you very much. I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? And I don't see any. Item 8 on the agenda, Housing and Technical Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 24 to 25, excluding the HRA, pages 41 to 46. And that is Graham Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Item 8 is the final capital budget monitoring report for financial year 24-25 for the General Services and the revised committee for the spend up to year to 31st of March. The resources spend was included in the overall position reported to the Executive Committee back in June. Section 3 gives the background and explains the budget position for the year, which was a total budget of 9.984 million, and this budget was unchanged since we last reported to the committee back in May. Section 5 details the financial implications, and at section 5.1 we're noting the total programme for the year was 9.984 million, with a final spend position of 7.379 million. As noted in section 5.2, this underspend of 2.6 million reflects the profile of spend across a number of projects, including within the multi-project and multi-year programme prioritised urgent investment fund, where spend will be incurred in the new financial year. Overall, the programme underspend reflects the timing of spend across the financial years, and the main projects responsible for the underspend are detailed in Appendix B. And this appendix also provides a list of the continuing projects into 25-26, along with their estimated completion dates. At section 5.4, we're noting as normal that any underspend, along with the funding, will carry forward into the new financial year as required, and an update on the new year programme is detailed in a separate report that I'll take you through shortly. As normal at this time as well, section 5.5, we're explaining the year-end accounting adjustments we have to make to ensure the treatment of spend complies with our accounting regulations, and this has no physical impact on the projects, with it being an accounting entry to make sure spend's categorised correctly between revenue and capital. And for the purposes within the spend for housing and technical resources, 4.3 million of capital spend has been recorded as revenue spend. I would refer our committee back to the recommendation in section 2 of the report and ask that the Housing and Technical Resources General Services capital budget of 9.984 million and final spend for the year of 73.79 million be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? And I don't see any. Thank you very much. Item 9 is Housing and Technical Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 24 to 25, and that's the Housing Revenue Account, pages 47 to 50. And Kathleen Gowrie.
Thanks, Chair. Again, this is the final report for 24-25, this time dealing with the Housing Capital Programme. At section 5.1, it notes the total programme of 77.248 million. That is unchanged from what was reported previously to committee. At section 5.2, it notes actual expenditure for the financial year was 71.544. That resulted in an underspend of 5.704. This underspend was a result of delays at site starts at Cairnswell Avenue, Cambuslang and Brackenhill in Hamilton. Both these sites are now progressing, and Brackenhill had a start date in Q4 in 24-25, and Cairnswell Avenue will be on site by September 25. In addition, the average purchase price for properties purchased through the open market purchase scheme has reduced, reflecting the current size of properties. Section 5.3 notes the carry forward of the underspend of 5.704 million into financial year 25-26. The approved programme for 25-26 had assumed a carry forward of 4.136. The additional 1.568 will be carried forward and included in the 25-26 programme. I refer members back to section 2 of the report, and committee is asked to note the housing and technical capital spend for financial year 24-25 of 71.544 million.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? And I don't see any. Thanks very much. Item 10 on the agenda, Housing Technical Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 25-26, excluding the HRA, and that's pages 51 to 54, and that is Graham Booth. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Moving into the new year then, this is a standard capital budget monitoring report for general services, the first for financial year 25-26, and this reflects the budget and spend position to the 16th of May, which is our accounting period 2. Section 3 gives the background to the report and explains the budget reflects the capital programme for the new year as reported to the Executive Committee back in June. And Section 5 outlines the financial implications. At Section 5.1, we are noting that the resources total capital programme for the year is 10.664 million. This budget is based on the original programme of projects approved back in February, and it's been updated to include the budget carried forward from 24-25 and adjustments approved at Executive Committee in June, and these total a net increase of 536,000 and relate to the Central Energy Efficiency Fund and bringing in the budget into the programme there. The budget at this time also reflects the estimated level of spend achievable for this financial year based on our current estimates. As noted in Section 5.3, Appendix A is showing a full forecast spend for the year, and for information, noting actual spend incurred to the 16th of May of 212,000. I would then refer committee back to recommendation Section 2 in the report that the Housing and Technical Resources capital budget for general services of 10.664 million and forecast spend of 10.664 million be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Graham. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Any questions or comments? I don't see any. Item 11 on the agenda is Housing and Technical Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 25-26 HRA account, that's pages 55 to 58. And Kathleen Gowrie, again, please, Kathleen.
Thanks, Chair. This report really just follows what Graham's just said previously, so I'll try and not repeat too much of that. But effectively, this one is covering the capital programme for HRA, the first report for the new financial year up to the 16th of May 25. At section 5.1, it notes the capital housing programme is 87.540. This includes the carry forward report, the carry forward from 24-25. And then there's an increase of 24,000 that's arising from the confirmation of the affordable grant for 25-26. The budget and the funding sources are detailed at Appendix 8, and the current forecast is a full spend for the financial year. If I can refer members back to Section 2 of the report, committee is asked to note the Housing and Technical HRA capital programme of 87.540 million and forecast expenditure of the same.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And I don't see any questions or comments. Thanks very much. Next item on the agenda is a Housing and Technical Resources Workforce Monitoring, 1st of March to 31st of May 25. That's pages 59 to 66. And Elaine McPake, please, Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the standard workforce monitoring report for Housing and Technical Resources covering the period March to May 2025. So section 4.1 outlines the attendance statistics for committee, and the details are in Appendix 1. So the absence rate for the resource for May is 5.0%, and that compares to a council-wide figure of 5.6%. That had decreased by 0.3% compared to the previous month, and compared to last year, the figure has decreased by 1.4%. All of that translates to an annual average projected for 25-26 for the resource of 6.5%, and that compares to a council-wide figure of 6.0%. Members will be aware that resource managers continue to follow the maximising attendance procedures, and work with personnel colleagues to ensure that all the supports are in place to enable employees to return to work and that appropriate actions are taken. Moving on then, sections 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2, and the main points are that during the period there was 191 occupational health referrals, there was 11 disciplinary hearings, there was 4 grievances raised, and there was no dignity at work issues raised during the period. There was 11 accidents or incidents that were recorded during the period, and over the period there were 11 leavers, and of them 18% completed exit interviews. So I'm going to refer committee back to section 2 and ask that the workforce monitoring information for housing and technical resources for the period March to May 2025 be noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. I don't see anybody. Any questions? No, thanks very much. Item 13 on the agenda is the Q4 Progress Report 24 to 25, and that's on pages 67 to 96. Lynn Hayes, please. Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The purpose of the report is to provide the Q4 Progress Report for the Housing and Technical Resource Plan for 24-25. Section 3 details the background, and Section 3.1 notes that the plan was approved at committee on the 19th of June 24, and it set out the outcomes, measures and action to be delivered by the resource for the financial year 24-25. Section 5 details the progress report for 24-25, and Section 5.1 of the report highlights that the progress against the resource plan measures is contained in Q4 Progress Report is actually attached as Appendix 2. The table details at 5.2 summarises progress to date using the appropriate traffic light system, and shows that of the 92 measures, 15 measures are complete and marked as blue, 63 are progressing in accordance with the plan and marked as green. There is slight slippage in 3 measures which are amber, and we have 2 as recorded as red. 5.3 of the report summarises the key resource achievements in the period, which includes a continued increase in the supply of affordable housing. 91.9% of our new tenancies were sustained for more than a year. 99% of our reactive repairs were completed right first time, and the percentage of our rent collected continues to perform extremely well. The table at 5.4 highlights the 2 measures which are classified as red, alongside the reason for these categorisation. In summary, one of the measures relates to homelessness, which can be associated to the extremely challenging operating context which exists both locally and nationally in relation to homelessness. And the second measure relates to the percentage of council stock meeting the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, with 88.7% against a target of 90%. And this can be associated with the changes to the variable tolerable standard. Section 5.5 of the report notes that highlights that Appendix 3 of the report outlines the measures that have changed status from Q2 to Q4 and provides an explanation of these. If I can refer members back to Section 2, the committee is asked to note the following recommendations. That the Housing and Technical Resource Plan for Q4 Progress Report 24-25, summarised in paragraph 5.2 and attached as Appendix 2, be noted. That the key achievements made by the resource today, as detailed in paragraph 5.3, be noted. That the areas for improvement and associated management actions, as detailed in paragraph 5.4, be noted. And lastly, that the additional scrutiny of changes in measures between Q2 and Q4, as summarised in paragraph 5.5 and detailed in Appendix 3, be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second it.
And I see I've got Julia Mars first. Julia.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 questions relating to the same page of the resource plan, but if I could take them one at a time. So on page 77, page 2 of the resource plan, it details that the number of households currently waiting for adaptations to their home is 0 for all the years noted. Could further detail and clarification of these figures be offered, as a 0 for all years seems unusual, but the detail would be particularly useful in terms of the context of the number of applications for adaptations and the numbers refused on the basis of tolerable standards. Thanks.
Cameron Mitchell.
Thanks very much, Chair. The figure of 0 relates to the number of, so basically the process works on the basis the health and social care are responsible for making assessment. the assessments that are prioritised, and then those that are past housing and tech, and the zero relates to it's demand-led and there is nobody waits. The figures relating to the assessment, the prioritisation are for housing, for the health and social care partnership and social work. That's how it's worked. That figure's always been there on that basis. Overwhelmingly, the adaptations that were done was 846 in total in the year, and will relate to people who have met the statutory criteria, which health and care assess in relation to disability. BTS tends to be very, very low. These, in terms of actually any numbers coming through, I'd be surprised if there was any, but we could check that.
Thanks, Cameron. Julia?
Yeah, I just would comment that perhaps the context of that, you know, would be useful for future reports. In terms of, I understand the point you're making that there is zero from the point of waiting, but the context of applications made and those refused would be helpful going forward. Okay.
Yeah. Did
So
you have another
I'll
question?
move on to my next question. Apologies, my phone has decided to, while I'm speaking, shut down. One moment. Yeah, so again on page 77, I noticed that there's 18.3% of tenancies are refused for 23-24, and similar figures for previous years. Having knowledge of the really in-depth work that our local housing officers do in terms of home options interviews carried out, these figures seem high, as matches made should be exactly that. I'm wondering what further detail regarding refusals could be offered, and what work is ongoing to further reduce that.
Cameron?
I contacts the director there and said, I'll answer this one, but Sam will certainly come in if she needs to. In terms of that figure, 18.3 might seem low. The report itself shows a bit of variance over the years. You know, those 4 years are reported there. The actual 24-25 figure is 23.1, so that's up for the 18.3. Now, I looked just before we come down the stairs, just in terms of kind of some of the factors there, and we actually, I think that 18.3 made us the fifth best in Scotland last year, with refusal rates, you know, going all the way down to beyond 50% in some local authority areas. It's a contextual thing, and the report says that. It depends what properties are coming up, what new builds happening. I think later on Jackie will talk about homelessness in terms of the types of offer we're making and what we might expect if we're actually trying to get people to expand their areas of choice, just so as we can house them as a priority. But I wouldn't put too much weight on it in terms of that, and I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Mars, the amount of effort is put into the reasonable offer conversations and to get it right and make offers there, but there'll always be some form of kind of dislocation between somebody's aspiration and the reasonable offer that's made.
Again, I think the only comment I would make, and that is really good news, that if it's lower compared to the average across Scotland, but I would say that the context again helps us to understand where we are in that report going forward. So if I move on to my last question, so again on page 77 of the report, it says that the average length of time in temporary accommodation is 92 days, which is obviously reduced compared to previous years noted in the report. It still is a figure that none of us can be comfortable with. And, you know, I'm concerned that is an average, and so in some situations that will be significantly higher. I'm wondering what context we can give to that figure, and the reasons for extended stay in temporary accommodation would be useful to know, and particularly the number of children that we have living in temporary accommodation, and wonder if that context again could be included for future reports.
Who's going to? Anybody care to comment on this? Right. Sharon, did you want? Jackie, sorry. Jackie Fairman.
Thank you, Chair. That is an average, and it's taken account of time in first stop and temporary furnished properties. So if we break that down to time spent in like first stop accommodation, it will be far lower, and then if you look at temporary furnished accommodation, the average right now is around 300 days, much higher than we want, and it's actually going up the way just because of the pressure in the system. So it does vary across temporary accommodation types, and then very much by household needs and across localities as well. So East Kilbride is the longest, the most pressured area, and the sort of highest time spent in temporary accommodation, and that brings the average up as well compared to other localities. So lots of kind of variances in that, and we could add that context definitely. In terms of children in temporary accommodation, there, again, it's higher than we would want, but good progress has been made reducing that number. I did bring those figures down and won't be able to find them, but we went from over 500. I could maybe cover that when it comes onto the homeless report. Oh no, I found them. So at the end of July, we had 460 children in temporary accommodation, so far higher than we want, but that's compared to 571 at the end of 2023-24, and that's really related to the real effort in the buyback programme to look at our most pressured areas, the shortage of bigger houses, and really target those property types, and that had a real positive impact on the number of children that were in temporary accommodation, particularly in the most pressured areas, and how long was spent in temporary accommodation. Is that okay? Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay, Gillian. Thank you, Jackie.
Yes, thank you. I think the context in all three of the questions that I've raised is really important, and we know that people's houses are everything. It is everything on the basis of upon everything else that's important to them. So yeah, I think the context really helps us to understand where we are and what further you're doing to improve. Thank you.
Thanks for your questions, and I think it highlights. Sorry. Yeah, I'll come in a sec. And thanks for the answers, Jackie. But it just reinforces the difficult situation that we're in. With homelessness. Sharon, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Councillor Mars. It was actually just to add to what Jackie and you've said there, Chair. So because we raised in February 2024 the significant concerns around homelessness, and since then we've been given the 6 monthly update, so that adds to that context that we provide within the resource plan. So Jackie's obviously got the report this morning, so that'll get into a lot more detail around the context, and we'll continue to do that given we're still in the midst of the housing emergency. So it was just to add.
Yeah, thanks Sharon. Again, it just reinforces the real difficult situation that we're finding ourselves in at the moment. Andrea Cowan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for this report. There's always loads of reading in it, and I just wanted to, first of all, just on the homelessness thing, just to say that obviously we expect that to continue to improve, and obviously South Lanarkshire, as everybody knows, was one of the authorities that got some additional funding, the 1.7 million, so I'm sure that officers are putting that to good use, and these numbers will continue to improve. My main point though was really it's just my thing, I suppose, is the buybacks, and I'm really pleased to see that we've bought 130 properties, so increasing our council stock, bringing back traditional council housing, which is usually well built, spacious accommodation, well served by amenities, schools and everything. So I'm delighted to see that we've bought 130 properties back, and that these are increasing our stock. Just really wanted to commend that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Andrea. I don't see anybody else, so sorry. Kerry Condry.
Yeah, Chair, can I have clarity for Julia? Because she made the point that we've got zero uptake, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be picking her up wrong, regarding the OTs putting forward work to housing to be completed. But Cameron made the point, if it stopped at social work, nothing at all to do with this committee. They can only react to what social work that gives them. Mm-hmm. Is that the way you picked up as well?
Absolutely. I think that's the point, is that the backlog, there is zero backlog because we don't do the assessment. The assessment comes, then the work's done.
So we don't have a zero backlog. We're getting no backlog.
Yeah.
Because social work's not give you any work to do.
They prioritise and identify.
So it's got nothing at all to do with this committee. It should lie with social work.
Yeah, fair. I appreciate your comments, Jerry, but I suppose it's relevant to the report, and I don't really have a problem with that question. But I think you're right, you know, and it's, I think what it does do, you know, when you look at the zero, there's maybe a confusion there that something wasn't performing so well, but it was to the contrary when we heard Cameron make his comments. Julia, did you want to come back?
Yes, I would just say that my question was not a critical question, it was a context question. It was that the report, and I realised that reports cannot always include every piece of information, or we'd be sitting here till next week reading them. But that piece of information is only part of the story. And what is also important in the basis of very excellent that there are no backlog in terms of you dealing with applications, but that is only one part of that particular story, and without that context it makes it very difficult to understand the real situation.
Thank you. Jerry, I'll allow you to come back in, but I really don't want to continue this, but we'll...
But I'm sorry, if that's the case, it's a bigger story.
Yeah.
But the story doesn't lie with the housing.
Yeah.
It lies with social work.
Yeah.
They're the people that assess the clients.
But the outcome of this, the question is, it shows that we're sitting better than probably Julia had anticipated, because of just the reading of the numbers. So it makes the resource look more positive rather than something that maybe Julia had picked up as being negative. But anyway, thank you both for your comments, and Cameron for clarifying. I don't have anybody else on that item, so it's item 14 and it's items for decision. And it's acquisition of houses at Eaglesham View, Eaglesham Road, East Kilbride, section 75, planning reference P 211616, pages 97 to 100, and it's Craig Jardine. Beg your pardon? Right. I'll bring that closer, but I was just about to finish the comment saying this is probably the longest introduction I've ever had, but I'll need to do it again. if it pleases you, Andrea, okay. Item 14 on the agenda is, and it's items for decision, it's acquisition of houses at Eaglesham View, Eaglesham Road, East Kilbride, section 75, planning reference P 211616. It's pages 97 to 100. And I'm going to ask Craig Jardine to speak to this report. You get that, Andrea? You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report on pages 97 to 100 is to seek approval from Housing and Technical Resources Committee to acquire 40 homes at their Eaglesham View development, Eaglesham Road, Jackton, East Kilbride, from Barrett Homes, for inclusion in the Council's housing stock and fulfilment of the planning obligations associated with the development of residential sites. In terms of background, on 8th November 2023, Strategic Housing Investment Programme 2024 to 2029 was approved by Housing and Technical Resources Committee. This includes projects with a total potential capacity for delivering up to 2,442 affordable homes in South Lanarkshire over a 5-year period to March 29, and included reference to properties within the Barrett development of Eaglesham Road, East Kilbride. So the proposal, the Council entered into discussions with Barrett Homes to fulfil their planning obligation for new affordable homes through a turnkey arrangement, with Council paying staged payments for each key stage completed for each house. The mix of houses across the sites consists of 3-bedroom terrace houses, 4-bedroom detached and 2-bedroom cottage flats and terraced houses. It is anticipated these houses will complete in financial year 26-27. The proposal provided by Barrett has been assessed by the Council's relevant technical and commercial services as presenting good value for money for the Council. And just for information, per unit that equates to an average of £218,000. Therefore, it's proposed to acquire 40 completed homes from Barrett, subject to the following principal conditions. The Council will pay a land payment prior to works commencing and take ownership of the site. The balance for each unit will then be paid in the following stages: at floor slab stage, wind and watertight, and then full completion. Council will receive a third-party warranty covering defects and structure for a period of no less than 10 years, and each party will be responsible for their own legal fees. In terms of financial implications, the acquisition of the properties will be funded from HRA Capital Programme and will be eligible for Scottish Government Affordable Housing Supply Programme grant funding, which will reduce the overall cost of the project. Section 7 discusses climate change, sustainability, environmental implications, and it's worth noting that all homes will be built to housing for various needs standards and silver aspect 2 level for energy standards. So if I can take you back to section 2 of the report, where it's recommended that the acquisition of 40 completed affordable homes from Barratt Homes for a total price of £8,738,502, which includes the cost of the land to fulfil the planning obligations associated with the residential development of the sites, be approved, and that the Executive Director, Housing and Technical Resources, be given delegated authority to authorise the transaction and instruct legal services to conclude transactions in the appropriate manner and in the best interests of the Council, with each individual transaction being in excess of the current £100,000 acquisition limit under the existing delegated power arrangements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. I'll move the recommendation.
And I'll second them.
Okay, I have Kirsten Robb. Kirsten?
Thank you. Yep, I appreciate the pressures and the need to move this forward, but I did think it was quite a lot in excess of the acquisition limit. Can you explain a bit more about the factors of what led to that? Also, does it meet the social housing quality standards, and how much funding do we expect from the government to help cover this? Thanks.
Before I bring you in on that, Craig, Kirsten, I mean, the acquisition limit, I'll be corrected here, the acquisition limit of £100,000, I suppose it might have something to do with the time that it was set, but I can't recollect any new houses being built and buying a new house for £100,000 or less, so it might be something to do with that, but that is an unusually low number compared to the current market, so I'm not surprised that the figures are higher, Craig.
Yeah. It's simply a value set through the standing orders. So if it exceeds that, then we obviously have to come back to committee for approval. So it's got nothing to do with the price historically of house purchases or in the future. It simply relates back to standing orders.
And that makes it very transparent for us. Yeah. So it's a positive rather than a negative, I would suggest, Kirsten.
Okay, so is that quite a usual price then? That's what I was really interested to find out.
Yes, so the price is actually very competitive.
Okay, right.
And we do benchmark that, particularly when you're talking about affordable housing through Section 75 planning conditions. We will assess that equally if it's our own development, where we may have some sites that are maybe have more difficulties such as contamination or planning issues, then the unit price would generally be a good bit higher than that. So in terms of value for money, that's a very good price, and we're very satisfied with the outcome.
Okay, thanks, that's great to know. And how much funding do we expect to contribute towards that from the government, do we know?
Cameron or someone else.
That is a kind of what the averages are and what we're getting, but then there'll be a specific related to that site when actually the application's made, which we'll only know once we actually fully put the figures in, but we can give you the averages that we're getting.
Okay, thanks for explaining all that. Thank you, it's useful.
And I think you said, Craig, that the average, that works out at an average of £208,000 per unit, and included in that you've got 4-bedroom detached properties, so I think that's quite significant, you know. Speaking earlier about the issues about the larger properties, this is helping to address that, and if we're getting value on average at 208 per unit, which includes 4-bedroom detached, I think we're doing pretty well. But thanks for your question, Kirsten. Anyone else? No. Moving on to item 15. Julia, would you like to vacate the premises? Shouting you back when we're done. Item 15 on the agenda is Castlebank House Building, and it's a community asset transfer to Lanark Community Development Trust, pages 101 to 108, and I'm going to ask Jerry McParland to take us through that report. Jerry?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is contained in pages 101 to 107 of the papers, is to advise the committee of the request for the disposal of Castlebank House outbuildings to Lanark Community Development Trust under community asset transfer, and seek approval to the principal terms and conditions set out in section 5 of the report. Castlebank House in Lanark is a Category B listed 3-storey former county house situated within the grounds of Castlebank Park. A full building survey in 2014 concluded that the property would require significant investment if it were to meet the required Scottish housing quality standards or energy efficiency standards set for social housing. And following an update of this survey and assessment, the meeting of the 30th of August 2023, the Housing and Technical Resources Committee approved the recommendation to declare surplus and dispose of 4 vacant properties within Castlebank House and formally engage with the remaining tenants with a view to reducing or ceasing use of the property. The associated ancillary buildings were not included in the sale of the properties and remained in the Council's ownership, with consideration to be given to their future use and any proposals submitted to the relevant committee for approval. Lanark Development Trust submitted a request for community asset transfer by sale of the outbuildings, which was validated on the 3rd of February 2025. And the Trust wishes to solidify its income streams to protect its future and sees this property as capable of meeting the needs of the local population whilst also generating funds. The Trust is a private limited company, limited by guarantee, with charitable status and registered with Oscar as a Scottish charitable incorporated organisation on the 16th of June 2009. And its objectives are detailed in paragraph 3.7.2. The Trust wishes to develop the derelict buildings with a view to improving the site and developing the income stream to sustain its organisation's financial needs to meet their objectives. They've provided architects' plans and indicative costings for the project, which are substantial and would require significant grant funding and investment. However, it should be noted that the applicant has already successfully leased property within the park, and this was granted with the obligation that they restore buildings which were in a very poor state of repair and maintain it thereafter. And they've been very successful in doing this and obtaining grant funding to fully modernise these premises and operate them as a base. The extent of the property, which is shown in the attached plan, extends to 540 square metres and comprises a number of stone-built buildings with pitched slated roofs. Planning consent and listed building consent would be required for the proposal, and it's not possible to predetermine the outcome of such applications. However, in principle, the proposed uses would be complementary to the existing uses within the park, and the disposal will enable the Development Trust to pursue external funding for the development of the facility. The risk of the transfer are considered low, as the condition of the building, the limited size and the configuration mean that any restoration of the building would be more costly than any commercial value it could produce. In addition, the disposal will remove the liability for a vacant listed derelict building which has no current future use for the Council. Within the request, the Trust requested a 100% discount on the independent valuation, as the price to be paid reflects community benefit which has been assessed as very good, and the requirement to seek best value in the disposal of a Council asset. A discount of 80% of the unrestricted market value would normally be recommended. However, in this case, the valuation prepared by White and Barry Chartered Surveyors in November 2024 reported the existing use value at £0. In essence, this reflects the condition of the property and the costs of restoration against the commercial value which will be generated by the development. The community engagement strategy included substantial local support, and public consultation ran from 3rd of February till 12th of March, with a total of 11 comments received. These comprised 8 objections, 2 supporting and 1 neutral comment, with objections originating from the residents of the attached flats. However, as noted, any development will require the necessary consents, including detailed planning permission, and will be subject to the normal consultation and neighbour notification process. It's therefore proposed to sell Castlebank House outbuildings to Lanark Community Development Trust for nil consideration, and I would refer members back to paragraph 2 of the report and ask that the subjects of Castlebank House outbuildings be disposed to Lanark Community Development Trust subject to the terms and conditions outlined in section 5 of this report, and the Executive Director, in conjunction with the Head of Administration and Legal Services, be authorised to conclude all matters in respect of the sale and enter the necessary legal agreements on terms which are in the best interest of the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I'll move the recommendation. Recommendations.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Andrea Cowan.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for the report. Just one wee point for clarification, please. Section 5.1, about the conditions, and number 5, the purchaser will be responsible to obtaining planning and any other relevant consents relating to use. Is the sale then, I know it's for zero value, but is the sale conditional upon them obtaining planning permission, or you know, or is it now their complete responsibility? Because this sounds like a site that could be difficult to sell to anyone else. And so I'm just wondering if that's a legal, you know, a legal responsibility for them, or if they've got a sort of get out if that doesn't come through for them. Thanks.
Jerry.
The normal situation would be it would be a contractual obligation for them to do so, but you're right, in this case the proposal would be that it would be sold, it would be a responsibility to get planning for any development, but it wouldn't be a condition of a contract.
Right, great, good to hear that, thank you.
And if there was conditions, it would say in the report, Jerry. You know, if it were to be that there was conditions, it would say in the report. Thank you very much. We can bring Julia back now, because we don't have any other questions. Thanks for your patience, Julia. I'm mindful of the time, colleagues. It's 57, 3 minutes to 11, so I propose that I take a 5-minute eye break for the BSL users, and I'll see you back here. We'll call it 11:05. Is that okay? See you at 11:05. Thanks very much. patience. We can resume the meeting now, I think, if everybody's here. Just a wee second to log in. Okay, item 16 on the agenda is the update on asylum and refugee settlement programmes, pages 109 to 116. And it's Jacqueline Fernie. Jackie, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. So section 1 of the report sets out its purpose, which is to update Housing and Technical Resources Committee on changes to refugee resettlement, and that's mainly the consolidation of the Afghan resettlement schemes, and also to update on the Home Office asylum response and overall a general update across asylum and refugee resettlement programmes. Section 2 of the report sets out the recommendation, and namely that's the recommendation to continue to support refugee resettlement at a proportionate level compared to the national number, and that's up to 30 families per year across all of the government resettlement programmes, as previously approved at Executive Committee in 2020. Also, the officers continue to engage with the UK and Scottish Government and COSLA representatives to maintain awareness of developments across planned refugee resettlement and the UK Government-led asylum response. Section 3 of the report sets out some background information, starting with the previous Afghan resettlement arrangements following the withdrawal of forces in 2021. The UK Government created pathways, and there were kind of two main routes, and that was assisting those that had worked with the forces and citizens that were identified as at particular risk. And the report notes the number of people that are resettled in the UK, the success of the programme, and that the majority of people that arrived have since moved on to settled homes. And it notes that only 6.5% of those arriving in the UK resettled in Scotland. Section 4 of the report moves on to the new combined scheme, the Afghan Resettlement Programme, or ARP, noting that it launched in March this year and it replaced the various schemes with a single pathway. Its focus is covering those that are already in the country waiting for settled housing, and they might be accommodated in hotels still or Ministry of Defence accommodation on a temporary basis, and also it's there for the relatively small number of people that are still arriving to the UK and eligible for the scheme. 4.3 of the report notes those eligible for the scheme receive indefinite leave to remain with full access to working benefits, and also the funding level that's available to local authorities per individual that they assist. And the aim of the scheme really is to reduce reliance on hotels and MOD housing and accelerate resettlement and integration. And the new scheme does limit transitional accommodation, so a significant change in that the UK Government will provide 9 months accommodation and transitional kind of option, during which time families are expected to secure their own settled housing. 4.8 of the report covers that the government's expectation is that 50% of households will be able to solve their own housing need and resettle quite independently following that 9 months transition accommodation. And the other 50% will receive greater support and government assistance or assistance assisted by local authorities. And section 5 of the report moves on to national asylum arrangements, noting that the UK is expanding dispersal to reduce pressure in certain regions in England and their expensive hotel use. 5.1 of the report sets out some of the key statistics published by the Home Office, and that's really demonstrating an increase in the volume of asylum claims. And then at 5.3, touching on the fact that the UK Government are considering their delivery models. They currently deliver asylum accommodation with management agents, Serco and Mears in Scotland, and they're looking at that model. In terms of the local context, while the council don't have any role or responsibility in relation to asylum. Officers are proactively engaging with partners in the Home Office and their delivery partners to understand local impact and prepare basically for new housing needs post positive asylum decision. And that voluntary support model has also helped us meet immediate needs for people accommodated in South Lanarkshire that do have support needs, connecting people to services and preparing for post-decision. Some of that's offering people who are looking to move out with South Lanarkshire advice and information and a bit of support around how they go about that when they receive a positive, if they receive a positive decision. And for the people that want to live in South Lanarkshire, trying to avoid emergency homelessness by planning as best we can. And a lot of that's really sharing information. Section 6 of the report focuses on the sort of local impact, considering asylum and refugee developments, and noting similar to asylum, Ministry of Defence is looking for, or sorry, the Home Office is looking for hotel accommodation in Scotland to replace use of the current use of Ministry of Defence accommodation and support the national dispersal away from concentration down south. It's noted in the report that the Home Office don't require approval of local authorities to proceed procuring hotel accommodation in a local authority area, but we are engaged in the national discussions and maintaining awareness around plans. There's currently no plans for any asylum accommodation in South Lanarkshire, but we maintain the dialogue and keep an eye on that. Moving on to 6.7 of the report, there's a summary of the support provided to date across from the very beginning of South Lanarkshire's involvement in 2015 in the Syrian resettlement programme. There's a summary of this is concentrated in Afghan resettlement, the level of support that South Lanarkshire has provided to date. And that's 13 families, and that's a rolling figure, not an annual. 6.8 of the report moves on to asylum dispersal, and it's kind of similar position to the Afghan position, in that we are actively engaged in the national discussion and trying to keep an eye on what's happening nationally and any impact for South Lanarkshire. And as I mentioned earlier, we're being proactive around the engagement and support with individuals and preparing for move on. In terms of impact locally, we are seeing a slight impact in homelessness, an average of around 2 homeless presentations per reporting period that are post-positive asylum decisions, so it's quite low numbers. I think there's a greater impact in terms of people who are presenting coming from outside South Lanarkshire, whether that's another Scottish local authority or direct from down south, and some of that's the broader homelessness rights in Scotland and removal of local connections, sort of allowing for that movement. From 6.12 of the report moves on to the broader refugee resettlement in the local context, and that South Lanarkshire from 2015 has continued to support at a proportionate level across the global and specialist programmes. And back in 2020 and then at Housing Committee in April 24, the Council committed to resettling up to 30 families per year. That's approximately 180 individuals across programmes. And then there's some information about the numbers supported. And Section 7 sets out next steps, and if approved at Housing Committee, that's broadly to continue to engage with partners, monitor asylum and refugee developments nationally, and continue to support up to 30 households, and that brings me back to the recommendations covered earlier. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. And I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second it.
Have we got any questions or comments? We've got Andrea Cowan first.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jackie. I'm glad to hear that South Lanarkshire Council are involved in talks, although I know you have no say, and that this is a Home Office directive and they'll put people where they choose to put them. But just in a general context, and especially with regard to the Afghan refugees or asylum seekers. I'm hearing nationally from other councils that culturally they have larger families. And so the thought of these families all just being bundled together in a hotel fills me with horror. I know that South Lanarkshire have worked really well in the past with the hotel in East Kilbride, and everything's just kind of been kept low-key and under the radar, and I would hope that the same happens here, because I think putting lots of people into hotel accommodation makes them a target. And just locally in my own ward, our local hotel was branded on social media as being a migrant hotel, and we had to speak to the police and everything about it, although nothing happened, but there was a whole load of dreadful social media posts about it. So I think this has all got to be handled very discreetly. I'm sure you'll do that, but I'm glad just to hear that you're involved at every level and trying to give some advice to the Home Office. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Kirsten Robb.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the update in this sort of rapidly changing situation. Having met many asylum seekers in East Kilbride through the work of the East Kilbride Integration Network, no one would wish the journeys that they've been on, but equally on a positive side, to see the potential to enhance our communities and our lives in our country through greater support and integration is amazing. Contribution already, I can see that myself. But it does need support and integration. So I wanted to ask, considering what the point you made in the report about not looking at the most pressured areas, how will we work in partnership with the local third sector, New Scots Integration Network and so on, to plan for and support that integration moving forward, so that maybe some of the issues where people are put in different parts of South Lanarkshire, some of the common issues, remote access to services and jobs and family support can be tackled, so that the asylum community and the local community can both benefit from similar issues that they face. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Care to comment, Jackie?
Yep, sure. Thanks, Chair. We work closely with third sector partners. You mentioned the EKN in East Kilbride. We also work with the Scottish Refugee Council. We are connected nationally to the resettlement teams. We work closely with COSLA. So I would say it's work ongoing. We've also been very lucky that the families that have arrived have been really supportive, and we've learned, I think you're continuing to learn, but we've learned a lot from the families that have arrived in terms of what we can do better to support arrival and kind of smoother transitions. And they've been really active in developing our response, so I think we've been really lucky there. And we've got some folk who've sort of had that journey working in our team as well now, and that's really benefited our team. So. But it's sorry if I'm waffling, but I would say it's just sort of ongoing work.
Yeah, thank you. That's fine.
Thanks very much. Okay, moving on to items for noting. I'm going to hear the first three items at least. Item 17 is acquisition of 4 properties at Christie Place, Cambuslang, to progress removal of reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, or RAC for short. Should have said that first. That's pages 117 to 120, and I'm going to ask Sharon to speak to this. Sharon Egan.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the report this morning is just to provide an update to committee here around the potential purchase of 4 properties at Christie Place. So I appreciate, as our Chair's mentioned, it is a paper for noting, but we thought it would be worthwhile to present this paper this morning for a bit of transparency. So in terms of background, there at section 3, we had brought the paper to Housing and Tech Resources Committee just in May this year, and that was to provide an update on the potentially dangerous RAC within the 3 tenement blocks at Christie Place and Cambuslang. That previous report also noted that the Council was the majority owner in each of those blocks, and that we had the ability to instruct the works to go ahead. But since that last report, it's been confirmed that the 4 non-council owned properties in the blocks are actually in the private rented sector, and all 4 are currently tenanted with private tenants. So that's just why we wanted to come back to committee and present this update. So in terms of section 4, the proposed acquisition of the 4 properties through our market purchase scheme. So we're proposing that we would now commence engagement with these 4 owners, so that is the private landlord, with the option of offering them that we would buy back their property through the council's market purchase scheme. However, I do want to note here that any valuation of the properties will require to have the cost of the rack deducted, and any associated costs linked to the removal of the rack and the reinstatement of the roof. Therefore, a significantly reduced value will be offered to these owners if they are interested. So, as you'll previously be aware, our enhanced scheme was approved by Housing and Technical Resources Committee back in December 2022, which set out the range of criteria, and that was set out there to allow the council to tackle a particular issue in a local area, or to allow the council to become the majority owner in the block, therefore allowing us to progress with works and having full ownership. So, therefore, utilising the market purchase scheme, the council will be eligible to claim a proportion of the property acquisition costs from the Scottish Government's Affordable Housing Supply Programme. So, Section 5 is next steps. We're proposing that engagement will be undertaken with the 4 property owners to discuss the potential purchase, as well as the cost liability for the removal of the rack and the improvement works, and with the sitting, and also further engagement with the sitting tenants to discuss a way forward. If agreement is reached to purchase these properties, discussions will then be undertaken with the current tenants to discuss their housing options, including the option to stay in their current property and become a tenant of South Lanarkshire Council. So timescales for commencing the works at Christie Place will be subject to agreement from both the property owners and the current tenants, and the successful acquisition of the properties. So I'd just like to take you back to Section 2, and albeit it is just for noting about the proposal to potentially purchase 4 properties at Christie Place through the market purchase scheme to progress the removal of rack and deliver the associated improvement works. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and I'll move the recommendation.
And I'll second.
I thought it was right to bring this to committee, given the kind of sensitive nature of this, and I can see this as a positive in the long term, because it's a kind of gateway into Cambuslang. These properties, once they're refurbed, they're going to look a lot better as well, and it's going to be, and it's not just the rack. We're proposing to do other features to the buildings, like bring them up to modern standards with insulation and so on. So, Andrea Cowan.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Sharon. Just want to welcome this. I think that this is definitely the way forward, is to try and buy these properties, not only to add to our stock, but I think it overcomes this issue, because these are huge bills, even for private landlords, you know, these are huge bills to get landed on you. And I'm glad that we're using that wee bit of discretion, and that we can perhaps, if the tenants wish to stay, that we can offer them that rather than buying them with vacant possession. So, yeah, all good. Thanks very much for bringing it back.
Thanks, Andrea. Norman Ray.
Chair. I too would like to welcome this report. It's good news. It was a concern that there may have been owner-occupiers that could have been financially troubled by the situation. So it's good news that that's not the case. And also, as Andrea said, that the private tenants will have the opportunity potentially to become council tenants and remain in the houses, which I think would be a good thing, or indeed to get an alternative council house, and that would take away some of the stress from those individuals as well. So I think this is good news, and thank you to the council staff for what they're doing on it.
Thanks, Norman. Item 18 on the agenda is another item for noting, but I'm proposing to ask Sharon to speak to this again. It's the homelessness update, pages 121 to 126. Sharon Egan. Oh, Sharon, is Jackie going to take it? Jackie.
Thanks, Chair. So the report's really just a regular update back to committee. Since the declaration of the housing emergency, we've came 6 monthly to update in the position. So the recommendations are really for noting the update. Section 3 sets out the background, mentioning the declaration of the housing emergency and the continuing strategic homelessness plan approach that we've had sort of going way back prior to RRTP. and the Council's ongoing engagement with the Scottish Government as one of the 5 local authorities most affected by the surge in homelessness demand, as mentioned earlier. 3.6 notes the highlights of feedback that we've given to the Scottish Government in terms of, we see the key issues as the need for adequate funding to increase affordable housing supply that matches the level of need, certainty in funding on a multi-year basis, allowing for longer-term development planning and more cohesive policy approach involving planning and utility companies to remove barriers. So there's a team at the Scottish Government that have been working closely with us and sort of engaging with utility providers and looking at what they can do to remove barriers as well. Section 3.7 of the report notes that we the funding, the additional funding to support RRTP that we've received over the last 7 years now, and noting that there's no indication of continuation beyond the current year at this point. We may hear different as time goes on. On to 3.9 of the report notes the continuation of delivering the mitigating actions approved by Housing and Technical Resources Committee, and then the sort of key points of those mitigations that we were trying to address the significant increase in the number of households in temporary accommodation, and one of the actions was around the buyback programme mentioned earlier. Our efforts to maintain sufficient temporary accommodation to meet this increased demand, and the work that we're doing to try and improve timescales to resolve homelessness and amongst the kind of emergency situation, and also a priority that we have to reduce the number of children who are experiencing homelessness and linked to that time spent in temporary accommodation. 3.10 notes the last 2 updates to committee reported early indications that mitigating actions were having a positive impact on key performance outcomes, but it was recognised at that time that followed 2 years of sustained and unprecedented increase in demand, and while demand was stabilising, it nonetheless was a challenging time in terms of the caseload and that sustained pressure in the system. Section 4 moves on to the performance monitoring update that we've provided since the declaration of an emergency, following exactly the same framework. And again, it shows some success in continued, following on from last year's reduction in the number of homeless presentations. That continues through quarter 1 of this year, and it was almost a 10% reduction for last year. So a positive, although again, it's a reduction, but it doesn't, if we look at presentations received in any reporting period, historically that would be around 150 on average over a year, and just now in kind of the last year, that 10% reduction, we were still sitting around an average of 200 presentations in any reporting period. So it's reducing, but not to the level of, historical norms or trends. So through section 4 is just commentary against the table, and represents in some areas a positive and improving position. And if we look at 4.5, the average case closure timescale, we can see that increased by just over 20% over the last year, and that's just down to the sheer pressure in the system. A caseload sitting over 1,500 that historically would have been 1,000 at its higher level at any time. So it's just taking time, but it is a positive. It's moving in the right direction positively. The commentaries there against each part of the table. In terms of next steps, section 5 of the report, the proposal is that we continue to come to Housing and Technical Resources on a 6-monthly basis to provide an update, and that officers continue to work with the Scottish Government, continue to deliver the mitigations, and work to achieve the outcomes that were set out. And that brings me back to section 2 recommendations. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks, Jackie, and I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions or comments, so we'll move on to item 19, the last one I propose to take at the meeting. It's item 19, rent managing update, pages 127 to 130, and it's Tracy O'Donnell. Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on rent management, including services in place to support our tenants manage their rent accounts. The background, the Housing Services Rent Management Policy was approved by the Executive Committee on the 13th of May 2020, and the core aim of the policy is to achieve an appropriate balance between ensuring tenants are clear about their responsibilities to pay rent while considering their individual circumstances, and a focus on working with tenants who are facing difficulties to gain an understanding of their circumstances and what support can be provided. Performance in relation to rent is routinely reported to the Housing Technical Resources Committee through the report source plan monitoring arrangements. Section 4 notes the support which local teams provide to tenants who are facing difficulty paying rent. This section also details the important role with a dedicated rent income support team named RIST, how they play in assisting and advising tenants affected by ongoing changes in welfare support, included the continued role of universal credit and the under-occupancy deduction. A second aspect of the support provided to tenants is the South Lanarkshire Council Tenancy Sustainment Fund, which, since it has been established in 2021, assisted tenants who are facing particular challenges. Housing officers continue to support tenants facing financial hardship by utilising the Tenancy Sustainment Fund to help sustain tenancies and signpost tenants to other sources of assistance. Section 5 notes the continuing high levels of performance achieved in relation to rent management, with all resource plan targets exceeded in 24-25. Section 5.3 also notes the Council's performance compares well with other local authorities. Section 5.4 highlights that the broader success of the approach is evidenced through other key aspects of performance. Evictions remain low. The councils compare well to other local authorities in relation to evictions as a percentage of the lettable stock. SLC is 0.13% compared to the LLA of 0.17%. And tenancy sustainment levels are comparatively high, with SLC sitting at 92.18% compared to the LA average of 91.10%. Since the initial rollout of universal credit in 2018, it has been clear to the Council that tenants are more likely to be in arrears once they transition to universal credit from housing benefit. Section 6 highlights some key points which influence the Council's approach to rent management, including during 2025, the rate of managed migration to UC will be escalated by the Department of Works and Pensions. The policy is due for renewal in 26-27, and the new IT system currently being implemented will support service improvement, including greater control and access for council officers, as well as the introduction of a new digital customer portal, providing tenants with easy access to the rent account to check balances and to make payments. If I can refer members back to Section 2 recommendation that the content of this report be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks very much. Is there any questions or comments? And I don't see any. Items 20 to 22, I'm proposing to move on block their items for noting, unless anyone is otherwise minded.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. Kirsten.
Oh, sorry. Could I raise something under the rent controls aspect? That's item 20.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. It was just to know, I don't know if South Lanarkshire maybe could clarify, has any student accommodation anymore, or is that all finished?
Cameron?
Sorry, Councillor Rob, in terms of construction or in terms of the rent control proposals in relation to student accommodation?
I suppose if we have some student accommodation, or even if we don't, but I note that the council's response said we would happy for that to be exempt from rent controls. Obviously there's a huge affordability issue for students, with many going to food banks and so on, but I understand from the Parliamentary Review Group that they're recommending that there should be some, although they can't include it in rent controls because there's other tenancy contractual issues, if they could introduce measures, separate measures to address the affordability of student accommodation. I was just asking if that could be noted as part of our committee report or as an addition to response, that we would support separate measures to make student accommodation more affordable.
There is limited student accommodation with the big cities. It's actually quite considerable compared to other local authorities in the immediate neighbourhood. And certainly what the response noted was that we felt that absolute logic, which we'd picked up for COSLA and for others who'd been proposing around student accommodation, was there would be some controls we applied, if not through the legislation, through the other provisions. Yep, so that's something we endorsed through the response.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Martin.
Yes, just on the same item, I noticed at page 132, there's a section where it says, while the council agrees that mid-market rent and build-to-rent properties should be exempt from rent controls, there should be a clear definition of basically what those terms mean. It's not clear to me why we would agree that those properties should be exempt from rent controls.
Cameron?
Certainly the point reflects, I think this is probably, I don't know, it's certainly maybe the 4th, 5th or maybe even 6th response we've made to the bill, so it's consistent with the position we've made before. I think it also reflects the COSLA position, which has been, the council's been party as well, which has been supporting exemption for mid-market rent. I think the point that has been very pertinent in that is what is mid-market rent, which again is what is picked up in the response, because the actual rent control provisions, I think, in terms of basically for each local authority to assess rent conditions in their area, and having assessed that, decide whether they think there's a case, and if there is a case, to apply to the Scottish Government for that. I think in relation to mid-market rent, that would be something you'd be thinking about, what are rent levels in the area. Mid-market rent, I think we point to what's the only sort of common issue, aspect of that, which would be how the local housing allowance is actually triggered in access to the 30th centile. And I think the Scottish Government have accepted, and more broadly there's a consensus that that needs a bit defined.
Hey, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, no, I'm more sympathetic to the idea that mid-market rent might not be subject to rent controls because there's a kind of a definitional kind of limit on rent increases for something to still be considered mid-market rent. But it's not clear to me why we would want build-to-rent properties not to be subject to rent controls. And my understanding was, like, I understand what you're saying about the current regime, about the application process to create rent pressure zones. My understanding was this was a consultation on kind of future regimes of rent control that hopefully would be a bit more expansive. So I don't understand why we would want to exempt build-to-rent properties from that.
Cameron?
It's got offline, but can I certainly? I think that the response we make in the full indicates that you could almost indicate that we don't think that of themselves, just to say build to rent or mid-market rent should be exempt, but only if you're actually considering how they're actually defined in terms of the cost, and the kind of proxy we've indicated that would be understood would be the local housing allowance level at 30th centile. If a mid-market, if the rent is sitting 10% above that or 20, then the case would be we don't. So we're saying that that needs to be defined, but it would only be that somebody's got a lower rent than you could have in the market. Local housing allowance level would be one that I've pointed to. So it's really that. It's not just that it's, but by in itself, we think that in terms of exempting it, you need to think of the level of rent. So that's there is a kind of qualification to that, Councillor.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much. So I don't have anybody else, so thank you all very much for your attendance. I've no items, beg your pardon, I've no items for urgent business, so bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.